And we are very thankful today. We have a very special edition of the TCU Alumni Podcast. It's our 50th class reunion edition. Due to the pandemic, we've combined we've had a super reunion this year. We have the classes of 1970 and 1971 joining us. Whole week of events for them going on in the last week of March. But we want to take two special graduates from those classes. First, we have Valerie Neal from the class of 1971 and Bubba Thornton from the class of 1970. They are here with us today to talk to us about their TCU experiences, all the great things in their life that they've been doing since then, where they're living today. You're up to hear about Colorado and Westlake, Texas. Those are great places. And the person that's facilitating this great week of events is my co-host today, Melissa Austin Week. She is a fellow graduate of TCU, 1988. Is that right, Melissa?
1987.
1987.
Yep.
Melissa, she has put in so much work. She does our women's network. She does 50th reunion. She does the Hispanic Alumni Alliance. So pretty much, if you're a graduate of TCU, you've probably talked to Melissa at some point. She was also a graduate of the Harris College of Nursing. So she has all the medical. So she's who I go to with all this COVID questions. So yeah. Melissa, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for hosting this great week of events.
Sure, Rob. I am so excited to be here. The 50th reunion is an annual event. We host it every year. Pre-COVID, we hosted it every year in May in conjunction with spring commencement. So COVID, unfortunately, had to cancel Bubba's class reunion, which was in 2020. And this year, the class of 1971 said, we don't want to cancel. We still want to have the reunion. If it means we have to do virtual, let's do it. And we'll invite the class of 70 to host with us. And so we're bringing two great classes together for one milestone reunion.
And this is great that we have all four of us in the same room. We're all in different locations. We're in 3 different states. I mean, this is fantastic.
And they're going to be, their reunion is actually, well, they're doing 3 things. They're Wednesday, March the 24th. They're going to have a virtual tour of campus. We have a really fun event planned with our Student Foundation members, which are our student ambassadors for alumni relations. And they're going to take you on a fantastic tour that you don't even have to move from your seat for 30 minutes. And you're going to get probably the best tour of campus you've ever had, and some brand new spaces that no one else is, not even the public has seen yet, y'all are going to see. And that will be followed by a panel with some students to share with some things that happened maybe when y'all were students. Like Valerie told me, the cues for freshmen that like girls weren't allowed to wear pants, wear slacks on campus. Maybe we'll get into that in our conversation today. And kind of what it was like to be a student in the 70s versus what it's like to be a student today. So that's going to be on Wednesday, the 24th. Thursday, the 25th, Rob is helping me with a fantastic virtual event that we'll be hosting on Alumni Worldwide Facebook, 70s Trivia. It's going to be amazing. We've got prizes. We've got old video footage. We've got the TCU band. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we'll finish with our traditional experience that we host every year. We're trying to replicate it as much as we can. The medallion ceremony with the chancellor on Friday, March the 26th at 5 p.m., followed by a happy hour where classmates can mix and mingle in their own chat rooms. So we're really excited. It's been quite a lot of work. It's interesting how a virtual event could be more work than an in-person event. And I think it's because there's a lot of moving parts.
That's what I've said this whole the last year is that, for an in-person event, we just tell everyone, here's the building, you guys show up. When it's virtual, we have to make you come to, we have to find a way to come to you. So
I think it uses different sides of our brains. So anyway, I'm excited about diving in. So for our listeners, what we're going to do is kind of walk down memory lane with Bubba and Valerie and ask them questions about what it was like to be a student, favorite memories. And then we're going to dive in to their amazing careers that they've both had. And then we'll finish with some advice that they have for our graduating seniors. So I'm going to start. We're just going to toss the question out and either one of you answer or both. What made you decide to choose TCU?
Go ahead, Valerie.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Arkansas, and when it was time to go to college, I wanted to get out in the bigger world. And I grew up in the Disciples of Christ Church, so I knew about TCU, but the advice is always to apply to more than one school in case you're not accepted. So I applied to 3 schools, one in Nashville, Vanderbilt, one in Memphis, which is now called Rhodes, and TCU in Fort Worth. And I visited all, and I loved the campuses, and I liked the towns. I thought this would get me out into the world, experiencing a new way of life. But I really fell hard for TCU. And when I was visiting there, I happened to have an opportunity to meet the chancellor, who was Chancellor Moudy at the time. And he was just a prince of a man, just a wonderful human being. And he spent, 20 minutes or so just chatting with me about what my interests were and what I was hoping my college experience would be like. And at the end of the visit, he kind of shook my hand and he said, "I really hope you'll consider TCU." And I said, "Well, I definitely am." I thought the campus was beautiful. I liked the feel of Fort Worth and everything. And I was so touched and impressed that the head of the entire university would spend a few minutes with me and essentially personally invite me to apply. So that made a big impression. And I heard from the other 2 schools first, and I was on pins and needles waiting to hear from TCU. And when I heard from TCU, I had an acceptance plus a very nice scholarship offer, which was a National Merit Scholarship I had been competing for independent of applying for specific scholarships at specific schools. And with the National Merit, it was specifically linked to TCU. So that made the decision irrevocable at that point. And another reason I was interested in TCU was it had an honors program at the time, and I really wanted to be challenged, and I liked the idea of an honors program. So I declined to the other 2 universities and happily came to TCU and loved every minute of it.
That's great. And I think a lot of students say the reason they selected TCU was because of the personal touch. Either it was a faculty member or the chancellor or an administrator or a student or a staff member that stopped and made a difference. So I love to hear those stories. Bubba, what about you? What made you decide to choose TCU?
Well, there's absolutely no doubt about the personal relationships that I had at the university. Obviously, really had a different route than Valerie. National Merit Scholar was not in my resume. And I had 2 men in my hometown, Coach Thetford and a man named Mr. Swansea, who wrote Abe Martin endlessly letters about this little kid from Keller, Texas. And trust me, there wasn't a scholarship at home for me to go to college. And so as it worked out, at the end of my senior year, Don Jackson showed up at Keller High School and had a scholarship for Bubba Thornton. And it was really a dream for my family. My father had become paralyzed in 1954 with a major stroke. He was a north side guy, and the whole family lived out there in the north side. And so to have one of the family get to go to TCU, that was a huge, huge honor. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was a first. And
Yeah.
for my family, the Thornton family on the north side, and the Piper family in Diamond Hill, I was going to be one of the first siblings to go to college, and I had a couple of girl cousins, and that's what was so wonderful about where we were in our time, because we were going to get to change everything in one generation for our families. So it was an exciting time for me, but then I had to add a little drama.
Okay.
I'm working in a meat packing company at the loading docks, and the phone rings, and they say, "Hey, Bubba, come over here. Abe Martin wants to talk to you." So I go over, and Abe says, "Bubba, we need your SAT or ACT scores."
Uh-oh.
I didn't know what they were.
Okay.
I really, in high school, probably hadn't been prepared to go
Sure.
to college. And so he said, "Don't panic, hang on, be patient. I'm going to call you back tomorrow." So I go home and I tell my parents, and it's, it was a tough evening.
Yeah.
Next day, Abe Martin called me, and he said, "Bubba, I've called this place down in Corsicana, Texas. If you'll go down there for 2 years and do what you're supposed to do, I'll bring you back." And I said, what? I mean, in 1965, you wanted to be in school for sure. Absolutely wanted to be in school. But I wanted to play ball. And so I got Daddy in the truck, and he knew how to get to Corsicana, and we went down there, and it was Navarra Junior College. And so my life moved to Corsicana. I didn't even know where it was at. And I did the things that Coach Martin wanted me to do, and I didn't hear from him not one time, or a person from TCU one time. I'm starting to get calls from other universities about coming there. And the week I graduated, Coach Martin called and said, "Be at the Letterman's room on this date and get ready to go."
Wow.
And so Abe Martin is my lifeline.
Gosh.
He got it
Wow.
all started. And so
Wow.
What a fabulous
Just-
story. And again, that personal connection that he cared enough about you to
that
really
was him.
encourage you and make it possible.
Yeah.
Make it
I wish-
possible.
when
And so
Rob,
I'd like to
So
comment
here
on
was the part-
something Bubba said about being a first generation student too, because, now they recognize students who are first gens. But back in our day, none of the adults in my family had attended college. And a few of them had barely finished high school because of the Depression. And so it was my generation of cousins and I who were the path breakers in our families. And I was the first one on my dad's side of the family even to consider going to college, and then actually do it. On my mom's side of the family, I had 3 other cousins who were older than I, and they broke that path too. But, we were all really the first generation who could even contemplate going to college because of the circumstances of our parents having grown up in the Depression and having to go to work right away.
My sister,
Or to war,
yeah.
having to go into World War II.
My sister is from your class, Valerie, Paula Reeves, and she was first generation because my dad was a Army Air Corps pilot, and my mom and dad got married right when he got home from the war. So college was not in a lot. College wasn't in a lot of people's lives at that time. So, but I love hearing, because we're going to move on to Rob's question, but I love hearing how you both had a very personal experience from someone that was associated with TCU. That's a common theme right there that I love to hear. Okay, Rob.
And so and again, that personal touch, I know myself, I was not fortunate enough to have that personal touch. I had a great experience when I was talking to everyone at TCU, but the chancellor and athletic director and football coach did not give me personal invitations to come to the university. So I'd imagine that, when you have someone, whether it be in 1965 or 2015, if the head of the university, the head of the athletic department says, we want you to come to this school, you've really got, what you think that this student experience is going to be like, like, wow, this really important person wants me. So how did the TCU experience, maybe live up to the hype of, quote unquote, your recruitment and generous scholarship offers?
Totally. In fact, for me, I think it exceeded even what I had hoped. For the whole 4 years there, I always felt that my faculty members were accessible, certainly during office hours, but just to linger around after class and talk. There was a tradition at the time in the honors program of faculty firesides, where faculty would invite 10 or so students to their house for a discussion of a topic of interest, or maybe you would have read a book in advance and have a discussion about that. The faculty were clearly very committed to our education, and there was never an instance where they didn't know your name and they didn't address you when you were on campus. And then the student body, I thought, were wonderful. At the time, diversity wasn't a catchword, but I thought the campus there was diverse just because Texas is such a huge place and people were there from all over Texas and from almost every other state. And as an out-of-state student and the only one from my hometown to come to TCU, I always felt very at home and welcome there, never felt like a stranger. And then the other thing is the staff were just terrific too. If you stop by the registrar's office or if you stop by any of the offices in Sadler Hall or something, people always gave you the time of day. They found out what you needed. They helped you. You were never brushed aside as just a bothersome student. Mm-hmm. And I would say for the whole 4 years I was there, I felt comfortable even just dropping into Dr. Mowdy's office from time to time to give him a little status report. He had a wonderful secretary named Tony Newton, and Tony knew all the students too. And I would pop by sometimes and just say, does Dr. Mowdy have any time this week for a little 10-minute visit? And she would put me on the calendar and I could go in and tell him, I came here, this is what I'm taking, this is what I'm doing, and just maintain that relationship with him.
Wow. I want to come back to that because I want to ask about what his office looked like and all that. So we'll come back to that because I want to hear.
You were not only were you a student, but you were also a student athlete doing 2 sports. So what was the general student experience like? And then what was it like also trying to be a student athlete?
Well, I loved being at the university. You were very visible to not just the student body, but to the faculty and to the administration. And they're always would put you to ease. It was like you didn't sweat the small stuff. Just worry about the big stuff because they had everything else covered for you. And the 2 sport deal, that's what I did. And the faculty, Dr. Standiford, Dr. Prowse, and some of those guys, Dr. Dorman in the religion department was part of the athletic council. They took personal interest in us. And I think that's kind of my success is the people that's been involved with me and been around me through this incredible journey that I've been on. And so I got a little bit from each one of them. And sometimes it would just be totally off the wall of what they might ask you to do, or what was going on in your life. Or Miss Planick, the music teacher, she loved to bake. And we had an egg place out in Keller that they let the chickens out in the garden, so the eggs were really yellow and you couldn't buy. So I needed to bring her 2 dozen eggs when I went home. So I just, I had those kind of relationships. And in the athletic department, we had a little deal with some beanies that those freshmen had to wear. Thank God I wasn't a freshman until you won the first game. And of course, traditions change and things move forward. But it was a really an important time to get to know people and to know who you wanted to put in your circle, because that was a circle that you were going to depend on, not only while you were there, but later in life. And you learned to keep it small, but you knew when they said something, they weren't going to tell you necessarily what you wanted to hear.
Yeah.
I remember Abe calling me in after a football game, and I thought I'd done all right. And he said, sit down. And he got up, and he drew a big circle on the blackboard. And then he drew a little circle outside the big circle. And he said, Bubba, you see this big circle? There's a lot of really good stuff going on in there. You want to be inside that big circle. You see this out here? This is you. You need to find a way to get in here. And I knew what he was talking about, because I was a little excited after we beat Texas that day. So, but anyway, it was all good, and I got the meaning. But he gave me that story because he cared.
Yeah.
About me and all the other guys. So it was great for me.
And I want to follow up, because you said that you spent your first 2 years in Corsicana. Did you feel any difference? Obviously, you and Valerie, you came in at different times. You came in as a transfer student. Valerie was a freshman. So how was your experience as a transfer student? What did you find it harder to make social connections, or easier, or how did that work for you?
Well, again, one of the first junior college players to ever come to TCU. And so, in fact, I think I may have been the second. I think there was the guy from Palo Pinto that may have gardened, but he was an academician. He was there for the whole deal. I was there to play ball, I thought. They taught me how to be a student. And you had 2 classes of athletes there that it was their turn. And then here I showed up. And so you had to work, you had to show up every day. You had to not be afraid to get your nose broke, and you had to compete. And as I did that, the guys accepted me, and I really appreciate all their friendships and loyalties over these years, because I wouldn't be here today if it hadn't been for them. So
Yeah,
it was a little different than being a freshman.
I could see how that would have been really, I mean, you had to put yourself out there. You had to take yourself out of your comfort zone and sink or swim. So good for you that you stuck it out.
Listen, I don't know if I had a comfort zone. I just knew that we had to line up. And,
yeah, you had to do what you could to stay.
I wanted to make them proud. I wanted everybody to be proud. And so there was only one other choice back in those days for guys. You were in college or you were in the service.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a good time to be in the service.
Right.
But we weren't even thinking about that, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
We really weren't.
So I want to know what each of your favorite memories, your most favorite memory when you were a student at TCU.
You go first this time, Bubba.
I got so many. I think my favorite memory was graduation day in 1970 when I went underneath the east stands of the stadium because they posted on the columns there if you graduated or not.
Oh,
And to see
wow.
your name, to see your name on that sheet of paper was my best day at TCU.
Wait,
And
okay.
that's
So,
how that's
Is it graduation day?
so graduation day.
they posted. I mean, you knew, but I've seen people look for their name and it wasn't
It's
on
not
before.
there.
So they had the columns and they had their names, and man, it was a good feeling to saw your name.
And then
And,
what? And then would you turn around and graduate like the ceremony was
You went
coming
into
up?
Daniel Myers. You went into
Oh
Daniel
my
Myers.
word!
You sit in the School of Education, and when they
So
called your name out, you just felt like you could fly.
Well, sure.
And,
So some people's families came to
now Valerie didn't
graduate.
have that problem. She knew she was an honor student. She was kicking out, and she had all the fancy stuff on her gown. But it was exciting, and I want to tell you about my graduation. On June 7th in '69, Kay and I got married, and my plan was to go to Eastern Hills High School and begin my coaching career. Well, that spring, I got drafted by the Buffalo Bills. And so I left after we got married, and I made the team with a bunch of incredible people, Jack Kemp, O.J. Simpson, names that you dream about getting to be there. Mm-hmm. And so, but I needed 6 hours. And I really think I'm the first college athlete that the university ever brought back and helped me get those 6 hours. Today it's just a norm because of graduation rates and things. But in 1970, that wasn't the norm. So it's another reason I'm really tied to frogs.
So did you do that in the off season?
Did it in the off season, and I did. I worked for Guy Shaw Thompson, who was the head track coach at the time. I helped him with recruiting and all types of other things during that year to pay for this tuition and fees that they had given me.
Gosh,
he got a good deal out of that, by the way.
I want to give a shout out for Eastern Hills because that was my high school that I went to, home of the Highlanders. So that would have been awesome for you to be a coach there. But I mean,
Bill Sadler was the head coach at that time.
Yeah.
So it was a cool time for me.
Yeah. Valerie, what about you?
I have a favorite repeated memory and a favorite one-time memory. And the repeated memory is I loved fall convocation and honors convocation when the faculty processed in wearing their regalia. Because I just loved the ritual of it and the sense that we were part of this timeless tradition of learning. And, the faculty with their different colored robes and their different colored stoles appeared entirely different than they did in the classroom. And it just meant something to me that's how TCU started the academic year with fall convocation, and then in the spring with honors convocation, which was a time to recognize everyone's accomplishments across the university. So I look forward to that every year. My favorite individual memory, and I hesitate to mention this because it caught me by surprise, so I don't want it to seem that I'm boastful. Okay, it was a surprise to me. But like Bubba, it was commencement. And, your name is called and you walk up the steps to the stage and the dean of your college hands you your diploma, and then you walk across the stage and shake hands with the chancellor, and then you exit the stage. So I received my diploma from the Adran dean. I was an English and history major, and I walked across the stage smiling because Dr. Mowdy was there and shook his hand, but he didn't turn loose of my hand. And there was this sort of momentary surprise. And he stopped the procession and he introduced me to the audience as the top graduate in our class. And I had no idea that was that.
Wow.
And I had no idea that he was going to do that. So it was a total and complete surprise. And the day was exhilarating to begin with. You know, my family was there, and we were all just in such a festive mood. But when he did that, it was like the circle came full circle.
Yes.
And it closed with him recognizing me personally at commencement. And I think it brought tears to my parents' eyes, and it left me in such shock that I'm surprised I didn't tumble off the stage as I left. But it was definitely a very special moment.
Did they ask you to make a speech?
Absolutely.
I didn't have to give a speech, no.
What a great story, though, that it, like you said, it came full circle from that handshake of a random gentleman that you had no idea when you shook his hand until he told you that he was Chancellor Mowdy, to your last experience as an undergraduate was shaking his hand to say goodbye. Oh my gosh. Wow. I love that. Thank you. That's a great memory. Those are two great memories. Your lives were just touched by incredible people.
I think so. Yeah. And, you know, the ones we've mentioned were ones among many, wouldn't you say, Bubba?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I could name off probably 15 faculty members easily who made a huge impression on me.
Mm-hmm.
And Bubba, you touched on it earlier when you said Abe Martin brought you in his office after the UT game. I understand you ran back a punt in Austin to beat Texas. It would be the last time TCU beat Texas from 1967 until 1992.
Oh my gosh!
So, do you still remember the play? And how was it like after you did it? If you still remember the play, I'd love to hear about it.
Yes, tell us.
It was really a beautiful Saturday day. The sky was clear. And I was with a great bunch of guys. I remember the ride down to Austin and warming up for the game, and their band came out, and it looked like it never was going to stop coming out. The game started, and it was back and forth, and they had all the guys we had read about, for the last 2 years being great and this and that. And if the truth was known, Fred Taylor probably told Mike Hall, don't let Bubba catch the ball because he's going to try to return it. And I'd nearly got my head leveled off the time before. But the guy was about one step too slow the second time down. And as I caught it, and he went to nail me, I could get to the side. And once I got to the side, there wasn't anything up the sideline. Oh. And so it was pretty much, it really was, getting past catching the ball was more difficult than the run. But at the end of the run, I threw the ball up in the stands. And that's why Abe called me in. Because I may be the first college guy to ever throw the ball up in the stands.
Yeah.
But it was an exciting time. And there were other heroes of that game. Cubby Huddler, P.D. Shabay, Post, just a bunch of the guys that were real heroes. Mike Hall, Billy Lloyd. It was really a team effort. And it was really a neat moment because then Sunday, when I went back out to Keller, I got to see Mom and Dad, and Mr. Thetford came by, and Mr. Swansea came by, and went over and saw Kay, and you know, so what? We got to play again next week, so we'll do it. So, but it was just one of those. I was in the right spot at the right time. And
did you beat Texas at Texas? Was that game in Austin?
It was in Austin.
I think I was there. I think I was there for that.
Do you remember that play, Valerie?
I don't remember that play specifically, but I remember riding a bus down to Austin, a student bus, and we were so excited to win because they had to turn the lights on the tower, the color of the team that beat them. And so as we left Austin, the campus tower was purple, and that was so exciting.
I don't remember that, Valerie. That was cool. I've worked down here for 18 years. I don't know if you might have had a little lemonade or something going back. I don't know.
No, I was a teetotaler. I didn't drink in college, but no, that was their tradition back then. That if Texas won, they flooded the tower light with orange. But if the other team won, they had to flood the tower with that team's color. And I remember seeing that purple tower and being so proud.
So when you're running the ball back, I mean, obviously there's 100,000 stadium, and you're focused on scoring, but at any point does it get into your mind, I'm about to run a punt back to win the game versus UT in Austin with 100,000 people that are going to be really mad when I cross this end zone?
You know, it was the game. It was I don't know. I knew it was important. We needed to do well. That was the time TCU was pivotal in which way they were wanting to go in college athletics, because the big bomb was fixing to go off and on college sports, of where we were going to go and how they were going to take it. And so it was important for us to do well. And I don't think I ever thought about what they were thinking at all, except it felt real good. I just remember it feeling real good for our guys when we went off the field winners. And when we came out of the dressing room, how happy everybody was, you know, that we'd gone down there and taken care of business.
So you both saw your name on the graduation column. Bubba was thrilled and relieved. Valerie, you know, she had her surprise waiting for her graduation.
Yeah.
Which, you know, Valerie, you talked a little bit about your mentality. You know, we talked about Bubba's mentality during his phenomenal moment. And you talked a little bit about when the chancellor shakes your hand. And do you still remember the sentence clear as day? I want everyone to know this is our top graduate.
Well, you know, I probably remember everything that everybody else remembers about, you know, coming over to Daniel Meyer Coliseum in our gowns. And we didn't wear purple yet. That came later than when we were there. We just wore black gowns, and we didn't have all the ribbons and cords and everything that we wear now. We all looked exactly alike, as I remember it. And I don't even think people were decorating the tops of their mortar boards or anything. We weren't as playful, perhaps, as graduates are now, where they really deck themselves out for commencement. But going over to Daniel Meyer and getting all lined up and all that sort of thing, and seeing your friends and knowing that some of your friends you're seeing for the last time, and everybody's just exhilarated. You know, all of our families are there. It's the culmination of 4 years of our hard work and also the fun we had and the service we did. I mean, you really create a community when you come to college when you come to the university, I think certain institutions exist on campus, certain residence halls or certain Greek fraternities and sororities and certain clubs. But you make your own community by what you decide to do. Mm-hmm. And so then you're part of that community. Bubba's part of the athletic community for sure. And I was part of several communities, actually, kind of the English and history folks and the honors folks. And in my second year, I pledged a Greek sorority. So I was part of that group. And then I was on a couple of university-wide committees. And I had a job and with one of the faculty members. And so I just had this sense at graduation that we all had come through with flying colors, and we were all now about to embark on our individual adult lives, and didn't know when I would see anybody else again, but I just felt full of love for the university, for the whole experience of 4 years, affection for all my friends, and a sense of pride for all of us that our communities were coming together one last time and moving on.
Yeah, I love that.
And so you cross the graduation stage, and as you said, Valerie, you enter the world. You don't know when you're going to see your classmates. If each of you can maybe touch on what the real world experience was like for you upon graduation.
Go ahead, Bubba.
It was just going to be a continuation of goal setting, showing up, having been prepared to do certain things to move forward. And as I moved forward, listen, keep the good information, throw the bad away. And I would still keep my circle of trusted people that I knew would always tell me, not necessarily what I wanted to hear, because as I started moving through, I found there were a lot of people out there that were experts at telling you what you thought you wanted to hear, but really wasn't good for you. Mm-hmm. And so it just worked for me. And you get so busy, and this is a sad part, I think, unless you really stay close to the university and get to be part of their events on a yearly basis, you get so busy with your life doing your things and climbing and trying to move forward that you lose touch a lot of times with some of your best friends. And it's unfortunate, but things like this help bring you back for a moment or two. And those moments are really the big paydays for me. From some of the athletes that I've had at TCU to some of my past teammates. I just saw Cubby Huddler. He's the president of the Regional State Bank in Johnson City. He would knock your head off. I hadn't seen him in 20 years. And to me, he looked just like Cubby and acted just like Cubby, and it made me feel really good. I mean, for everything we've been through the last year, he wiped it away with just a smile. Mm-hmm. And so my life experiences have been about people, and a lot of people say achievements they're just moments to me. I was expected to get there, to do it, to get done. I just didn't know what progression it may come. I had to be patient a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's kind of where I was. After that graduation,
I was on a mission. When I left TCU, I was on a mission. I aspired to teach. at the college or university level. So graduate school was on my horizon, and I wanted to go straight into graduate school because I was a little bit fearful of losing my momentum. And also, I felt like I had sort of proven myself in the bigger world from Arkansas by moving to Texas. So I decided I wanted to move out into the yet bigger world. And I went out to Los Angeles to attend graduate school at the University of Southern California for just about a year and a half, to earn a master's. And then I went on to the University of Minnesota for about 5 years to earn my doctorate, and then went on to New York on Long Island to finish up writing my dissertation while my husband had a postdoctoral fellowship. And then in 1979, which was 8 years after graduation, both of us with brand new degrees and everything, we moved down to Alabama to start our careers. And so I was kind of an itinerant for the decade after graduation, still in school the whole time, taking classes, teaching freshman English at the University of Minnesota to earn my keep, and teaching some other courses now and then to learn the craft of being a professor, and ended up coming down to Alabama to Huntsville, where my husband got a job first. And I had a brand new baby, so I wasn't in a rush to get a job right away. But after a year down there, I started working with NASA. And yeah, it makes no sense, right?
Okay, so let's stop for a second. In 10 years, you got your master's degree, your PhD, got married, had a baby, and then, oh, by the way, NASA calls one day and says, would you like a job? So it doesn't happen to many people.
How do you go from freshman English to NASA?
No kidding.
Yeah, that's what, it always makes a good story. And actually, when I was in graduate school, I was studying mostly 19th century American history and American literature, and I thought that's where I would teach. And I went on the academic job market, and I had interviews with a couple of schools, and had I been single, I would have taken one of those jobs. But the places that interviewed me weren't places where my husband could also get a teaching position or a research position. So we kind of had to negotiate between us what our strategy was going to be. And we wanted to find a place where we could both find a career. Mm-hmm. And we decided, since we had just had the baby, that he could have first dibs. And so we actually left New York. He had 2 job offers, one in Alabama and one in California, and he was deliberating on them. And he was driving the U-Haul truck, and I was driving our car with the baby, following him. And he said, just follow me, and when we get to a junction, I'll decide. I'll either head south or I'll keep going west.
God.
So we ended up going south. And he had interviewed at both places, and in fact, knew what we would be getting into. So I was happy with that decision. And when I got ready to go back to work, when my child was about a year old, I did some part-time teaching at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. But there really wasn't what they call a tenure track position open or a full-time position open. So I started watching the want ads, and one day there was an ad in the newspaper looking for a writer and editor. And as an English major, I could write and edit. I mean, I spent my whole life writing papers and grading papers. So I was pretty good at editing too. And it just so happened that the client was a laboratory at Marshall Space Flight Center, the NASA installation in Huntsville. And so they hired me, and that was the start of a 10-year career as a writer and editor for NASA. The space shuttle era was just starting. I was hired in 1980, and the first shuttle flight was 1981. And some of the shuttle missions were designated as scientific research missions. Others were to deploy satellites or to fly things for the Department of Defense. But the research missions were really interesting, and it was that office that wanted somebody to write about those missions and help the press understand how the shuttle could be used as a laboratory, a kind of a space station before there was a full-time space station. So that's what I did for 10 years, and I kind of moved up from, or moved out, not up, moved out from shuttle missions to the Hubble Space Telescope was being built at the time, and everybody was gearing up for what a fabulous observatory it would be. So I did some work with the astrophysics division, writing about the Hubble Space Telescope and some of the other observatories that were coming along. And then I got involved with Johnson Space Center in Texas. They were running a series of life science missions where the crew members were actually doing life science experiments on themselves and also on laboratory animals and plants and other things. So I ended up writing about those things too. So that was my career in the 1980s for 10 years. And
was it hard, Valerie? I wanted to interrupt here. Was it hard to write about something that you had no knowledge of?
Not really, because what you learn as an English and history major is to do research and to learn what you don't know and to learn it well enough to write about it so other people can understand it. And so I've always said that TCU was the best part of my education, more so than my 2 graduate schools, because I learned those skills and I learned those habits of mind. And so once you know how to learn, then you can learn about anything. And so, yeah, I never took physics, but I started writing about physics, and I was able to learn enough physics not to be a physicist, but to write about physics. And of course, I had physicists review what I wrote to make sure I didn't make any mistakes. But it's part of having a liberal arts background, a liberal arts education, is you learn how to learn, you learn how to do research, you learn how to think creatively and critically, and you learn how to synthesize information and put it together into thoughtful essays. And so in a way, it was kind of like continuing my life as an English and history major with a different subject matter.
Sure.
So were you writing for NASA, or what was your duties? Obviously, they say 1980s, and the first thing that came to mind is the Challenger explosion. Did you have to do any writing or post-op of that fateful day?
No, I didn't. And I'm grateful that I didn't. It was a terrible day. I remember it very well. We had an opportunity in Huntsville to meet various crew members from time to time when they came to the Marshall Space Flight Center to do their underwater training. And I learned to dive so that I could go into that neutral buoyancy tank and help out with the training. As a writer, I started keeping notes from those test exercises they did, and sometimes being the test conductor, just reading out the instructions to them over the microphone that they could hear in their helmet. But eventually my boss suggested that I take diving so I could get in the tank also and be a helper. And so I didn't have any work up to the Challenger mission that was distinctly related to it. but I was doing work related to deploying the Hubble Space Telescope and some of the other missions that would have crew activity going on outside. The main thing I remember, other than the accident itself, is that NASA kind of put a freeze on all contracts because they knew they weren't going to be flying for a year or two until they resolved the problem from the accident, the problems from the accident. So that affected my workflow. And by that point, I had hired 3 or 4 other people to work with me. We had enough writing work to do. And so I remember being anxious about how we were all going to keep ourselves afloat and if our contract work was frozen. And fortunately, our company found other things that we could do in the interim, so none of us were laid off.
And so is this writing going in magazines, or is this for NASA employees? Or I'm just trying to understand you're learning about every aspect. What's your audience that you're learning to write for?
The audience was largely the press and members of Congress and constituents of the people who had experiments flying on those missions. And so much of what we did was in magazine format, but it was a magazine for each individual mission. And they were full-size, magazine-size color brochures that explained the science, like, why would you want to do this research? What's the practical or the theoretical benefit of doing it? Who are the crew members? What's it going to be like for them up there doing this research in space? And NASA would print, 40,000 copies of those or something and distribute them widely to the media, to the members of Congress, to the people they wanted to educate about the shuttle, the use of the shuttle, the kinds of science being done, the Hubble Space Telescope, and that kind of thing. And then I wrote 2 books. One was a history of the Marshall Space Flight Center for its 25th anniversary, and that was geared largely to the NASA community and the Huntsville community. And then I did one book at the end of the 1980s that was a recap on those early science missions, kind of looking at all of them as a group and summarizing what the accomplishments had been, what the lessons learned had been, and that sort of thing. And all of that work then prepared me for my next job. But I've talked enough. I think Bubba needs to chime in here about his career path.
Yeah, I want to hear what happened to him after you got your Buffalo Bills job.
Yeah.
O.J. Simpson.
Well, I was drafted as a defensive back, and receivers got hurt. And I went in and talked to the head coach, and he looked at me like I was a fool. Well, the next day at practice, we had a scrimmage, and he called me over, and he said, run this pass play. And Jack Kemp was the quarterback, and he threw it, and I scored. And I came back to the huddle, and he said, I can't tell you what he said, but kind of get out of the way. So in about 5 minutes, he called me back over, and now Jimmy Harris is the quarterback, and he calls the same play. I score. I come back to the huddle. He says, even more explicitly, get out of the way. So now he calls me in the huddle for the 3rd time. Bandera is the quarterback. Calls the same play, and I score. Now I've got all the defensive backs wanting to kill me. And I don't know where I am because I'm getting explicit information when I come back to the huddle. And And so the receiver coach, Miller, comes over and he said, "You're going to move to offense tomorrow." Well, as it worked out, Bill Enyard, O.J. Simpson, Jimmy Harris, and myself were all rookies. And we start the season against the New York Jets, who had just won the Super Bowl. And I thought I was going to trip and fall when they introduced, you know, how you ran out on the football field back in the old days.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I'd trip and fall down over the chalk line. I was nervous. But it was, you know, that was an exciting time. And it worked out, and I bounced around for a little while and then got into high school coaching and was fortunate to be in my hometown. It was booming. And they said I'd been gone long enough and they wanted new energy into the program. And so I became the AD head football coach there. And then after 6 years there, Frank Wendiger at TCU called me about the track program. And I said, "Frank, give it to me." And I don't know why he did, but he did. And that was the start of the Flying Frogs and world records and national championships and collegiate records and great athletes, Raymond Stewart, Ratio Porter, Greg Schiller, Roscoe Tatum, Keith Burnett, Philip Epps, James Maness. I mean, there's been 442 All-American honors that I've got to be part of, and records and journeys. And so after 13 years at TCU, the Lost Dodge called at Austin and offered me to come down here and have all this fun here for 18 years. And in the process, an assistant Olympic staff position in 2000 in Australia. I was the head coach for the States in Beijing and the head coach for the United States at the World Championships in Paris. And still just a guy from Keller, Texas, you know. Had good people around me, and I hope I've shared all those moments with them. And it's just been a great journey. And then I look at all the guys that and women that have performed for me. We started a really legit program at TCU for the women. And, you know, I think about how they had to line up. And it was tough because we were going against some really big programs. Beverly McDonald, Lisa Ford, Sonia. I mean, I think about them and Rebecca Allison and coaches that helped me there, John McKenzie, Ken Garland, Gary Peacock. We weren't making $6 million a year, so it was just great moments, and I'll never forget. We'd been to the Penn Relays, and we'd set a world best in the 4x2, and on the New York Times, on the front page of the New York Times, it says Flying Frogs set world best. And Chancellor Tucker came down the track in his robe, in his house shoes, Sunday, because we'd always get back and go up there and loosen up from the plane ride. And he said, "It took my track team. I've been waiting all these years to get on the front page of the New York Times. And here's my Flying Frogs. Did it for us."
Wow.
But
I've often said that I could not have planned my career. You know, the good luck I had along the way, the things that happened, kind of being in the right place at the right time, or having somebody make an offer that, you know, I never anticipated. Do you kind of feel the same way about your career, that if you had planned, that you couldn't have planned it the way it turned out?
I may not have planned it, but I wanted it. I really wanted it.
And you got it.
I cherish my moments at TCU, but I wanted to be the head coach at the University of Texas. And as I became involved in track and field, I could see how my path might allow me to represent the United States and be part of that and have the memories with those different athletes and to get to know different people in the sport. And you never knew where the next person might come that would affect your life. But my deal was always patience. If you got a little scared, don't be afraid to take the first step. You got to take that step forward and show up.
And so you actually, that advice you just shared is exactly what you did in order to be able to be a TCU student, you know? So you put your faith in Abe Martin.
Yes.
About the fact that he said, go to junior college, get 2 years of experience, and I promise I'll bring you back. And you took that leap of faith and you wanted it. So, wow, that's very powerful.
Well,
and I always felt that in my career, I was kind of putting one foot in front of the other. You know, I went on to a master's degree and on to a PhD. But once I got through that, I felt my career was a matter of going off to the end of the high diving board and taking a leap. You know, can I do this job? Can I do this for NASA? And then after I left NASA, I had an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and work at the Smithsonian. And I thought, you know, can I really do this? Am I capable enough to do this? And the image that came to my mind is going out to the end of the diving board and just doing it. And if you don't, you'll always wonder if you could have, and you may regret not having taken that leap. And so when I talk to students, I try to remind them of that. Yeah, Bubba, go ahead.
You will regret not taking that step forward. I've seen it with athletes and people that I've been involved with. Very secure here, but if you took the step, it may have opened up a whole universe for you. And then they'll talk about it later in life. You know, nice thing about my life experiences, I can have a beer with the guys now. And it's amazing how good they have really gotten over the years. But it was to take the step, to think about, I mean, TCU athletes from all over this fantastic state we live in, and how they brought that together and made it work, and it's working. And I got to be a little small part of it. I look back at my journey. Today is my birthday. This is my 74th year of a journey that still is just going on. You know?
Like literally, like today really is your birthday?
Yes, it is my birthday.
Well, happy birthday, Bubba.
No, I try not to remember them, but Kay reminded me today, it's nice to have them.
Sure. And you know they're coming. That's what my husband always says. I like to have them. I like to know that I am having a birthday. So, well, happy birthday. I guess we probably are time. It's time to wrap up. But I want us to make sure. I want y'all to think about graduating seniors. And what is your one message that you would want them to hear as they walk across the stage and start their new beginning?
For me, I would say find the thing you love and spend your life doing that. And if you didn't find it yet at TCU, there's still time to find it. But don't spend your life doing something that you don't love doing. Find whatever it is that's your passion and do that. And if it presents itself to you sometime as an unexpected opportunity and you feel like you have to make a leap of faith, if you can afford to do that, do that. Take that leap of faith because things will work out. One opportunity leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. But the last thing you want to do, I think, is trap yourself when you're in your 20s doing something that you don't love just so you can pay the rent. And that's not a good way to spend your life. You'll live a very full and satisfying life if you're doing the thing you love to do, and you'll keep growing.
That's a great message. Okay, Bubba, you end us out with what your best advice is for a graduating senior.
And Valerie made some awful good points. I'm usually not, I get pretty much to the point, is that be patient. Don't be afraid to take a step forward. Show up every day. And I heard this, and I don't remember where I heard it, but don't sing the song. Be an artist. Work at it. Keep your circle small and really trust the people inside that circle. And I think life can be just another day in paradise.
Gosh, thank you both so much. I mean, Rob and I are so blessed that you accepted our invitation to spend time with us tonight chatting. And I think you are the epitome of the type of student that we're wanting to attract and grow. And we just really value you, and we honor you, and happy 50th anniversary from TCU.